Welcome to episode 30 of the Lilly List Podcast. We're honored to feature Sara Ecklein, a professional fiduciary, entrepreneur, and host of the Legacy of Love podcast. Sara joins us for a deeply personal conversation, sharing how her childhood experiences shaped her path to helping others navigate the complexities of life and death planning. From growing up on a half-acre cow town in Marin County to facing significant family and financial challenges, Sara's journey is a testament to intentionality and the power of proactive planning. Join us as she discusses the crucial importance of having difficult conversations, the hidden blessings of acknowledging mortality, and why true peace comes from preparing for the unexpected. As always, visit lillylist.com for more information on the podcast and platform. You can also contact us from the website if you have questions or ideas for people or topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. If you'd like to support the work of Lilly List, you can donate using the links in the description, and if you find these conversations meaningful, we thank you for liking, following, sharing, or subscribing wherever you listen. Sara Ecklein, thank you for joining the Lilly List podcast. I'm glad to have you here today.
Kurt, I'm so happy to be here, and I love this work. Lilly List. This is everything that I'm about. So
I
looking forward to
appreciate
this
it.
conversation.
Like the rest of life, we are a work in progress, so we're moving forward. I like to start very basically. Where were you born? What was your early life like? What were some impactful things that started off your journey?
Oh, yeah. That's a nice place to start. So I was born in San Francisco, California. And I'm still living in the Bay Area. I feel like I'm one of the few natives still
Lots
left.
of change over that time.
Yeah, a lot's changed. My birthday is actually coming up, so I'm about to turn 37. Yeah, the Bay Area has definitely changed and evolved, and I feel like it's going through a lot of growing pains right now. Yeah, I grew up in Marin County, which is considered the North Bay area. And at the time, I grew up in a town called Novato, and it was honestly a bit of a cow town. It's the last city before you reach Sonoma County. That's how far north it is. So my childhood was very sweet, very blessed. I grew up on half an acre. I was in 4-H. I had rabbits and ducks and spent a lot of time just in nature, playing with my neighbors, running back and forth between houses. So, yeah, very, very blessed. I think as a mother and parent now, there is a bit of nostalgia of missing those times because I feel like the world's changed so much. And unfortunately, that's not the setup that we currently have. We're more in a concrete jungle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, life was pretty sweet, and we lived in my childhood home till I was almost 13, and at that point, my father's always been an entrepreneur, and we really lost everything. So we had to basically sell everything, file bankruptcy, and then we were transplanted to Sacramento, which I was always, like, really resistant to. So I always joke that I felt like a bit of fish out of water in Sacramento compared to the Bay Area. And once I turned 18 and going to college, I went to Mills College, which was based in Oakland. So that's what got me back to the Bay Area.
Cool. Cool. It's interesting. Did you have any siblings?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest, and I have a sister who's 5 years younger. I would say part of, I would say like my identity, like who I am, is very much based on that, right? Our family system and how I sit in that. And kind of being a mother hen, caring for the younger, also like caring for my mom was
Mm.
like a big piece. And I would say my dad was not as present when we were little. So he was building a business and he also struggles with addiction. So it was a bit of the workaholic, alcoholic, not really present. And my mom was definitely spread thin.
I was going to ask, yeah. So I know the work you're doing now, and we'll get into that later, but all of us, of course, are a product of nature and nurture, genetics and environment.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm always curious with what you're doing now, which is really focused on planning, preparedness, things like that. You mentioned your father being sort of entrepreneurial minded. I'm curious with you kind of how you feel about your mix of your parents and then how much the environment you were in you think sort of impacted you getting to where you are today.
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's actually a few stories there, but similar, like, I feel like a lot of my creativity and also walking the path of also being an entrepreneur and building the business and now also podcasting, that very much comes from my father. And how that played out for me was really my original plan was once I did find this work, which that's maybe we'll get to that story, maybe not. Let's see. But once I really committed to being a professional fiduciary, where I came to this work very young, I was only 25.
Wow.
Yeah, I felt really originally the plan was I was going to be a hospice nurse. And I felt called to serving an end of life care after being witness to someone's final 3 days of life. And really, that was like a mystical spiritual experience for me where it was just like leaning in. And honestly, it was just, I think it was a bit of like my ego dissolving and being present, really present in the moment. And just really all the bullshit in life just dissolves with death. That's really the beauty, I think, of death. But eventually, I landed in working with a professional fiduciary and I did fall in love with the work, but I was only 25 and I don't know, at least for me, I was very non-committal, and there's a lot of responsibility with this work, so I never took it lightly. But the plan, once I did commit, was I thought I would work and stay with the fiduciary I was working for at the time and not build my own business. Looking back now, I laugh because my path, being an entrepreneur is like very much my path. Once I made that decision, once I made that leap, it's just been like, I guess, like turning the lights on to the truth of who I am. But, a bit of that story, and I think why I was resistant was because a bit of my father's story of being an entrepreneur was really kind of feast and famine. And not only did we lose everything when I was like almost 13, but the same thing happened when I was like 18, 19.
Wow.
So it wasn't until I was almost 30 that I started working with a money coach. And again, it's kind of funny looking back where I had never really acknowledged the amount of trauma that I had in this area of money. And once I started kind of teasing out with this money coach that honestly was more like a therapist than anything, not only my parents' stories about money and what I had been exposed to as a child, but also going back even to my grandparents and beginning to separate that from myself, I realized, oh, like this was my father's journey, but that's not mine. I don't have to carry that on. And I definitely see that, definitely as an adult, I'm way more cautious because of what I went through. And so that was really what I feel like having that information was what allowed me to make that leap of just acknowledging, oh, I'm not my dad.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, it's been definitely a wild ride and yeah, great questions.
I'm curious from that is you said 13 and then 18. And of course, 18, you mentioned going from this idyllic kind of, it's funny when you said half acre because I grew up in Boston and Boston, just like San Francisco,
Urban.
half acre is huge. So it's
Yeah.
funny that how that's viewed. But going from that San Francisco to Sacramento urban life, and then of course going back to Oakland to go to college. And I'm curious, so must have been right around when you were getting ready to go into college or starting that you then went through this process again with your dad on the financial side. And
Wow, you're so like you're
well, I
right
was
in
thinking
there.
like, what
You
is
could also be
your
a therapist, Kurt.
your college career though? I'm curious how you enter that, how you go into it. Did you head in going, I'm not going to be like that? Or did you go in and just say, these are going to be wild times and I'm going to live my life?
Yeah, I mean, with you, sure. It's a great conversation. Yeah, so, yeah, again, that's a big story, so and it is related to my family. The barn blew up a month before I left for college, Kurt. My dad was sober like most of my remembering childhood. He went to rehab when I was 7 and then basically wasn't drinking until I was 17.
Wow.
And then he relapsed. So that basically just a cascade of events happened a month before I left for college, which resulted in my parents separating and ultimately getting divorced. And so what that meant for me was I was estranged from my dad for basically a decade.
Oh,
And I really kind of continued the plan, which was going to a private 4-year school. I also started college in 2006.
oh, right
And
before Big Burst.
yeah, so that also was my grandparents were always they paid some towards my college, but not a lot. And that financial picture really changed when I was in school. So there was a lot of just the family unit like shattered. My mom had to go back to work full time. She was still at home with my sister 5 years younger. My parents separated. They actually lost that house. So it was kind of like this perfect storm. And for me, I just kind of figured it out, but I didn't have kind of these parents guiding me. And now looking back, absolutely, there's like a lot of pain, especially I think being a parent where, and of course wanting to create the best life possible for my daughter. Yeah, there was never like, maybe we should pause and take a year off. There was no options. And
Yeah.
I took out a lot of student loans to kind of bridge that gap. Same thing, I didn't have any kind of parents supporting me. And it's crazy that in this country, an 18-year-old can take out so much loans. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was just really this off on your own feeling. And I definitely identify as a parentified child. I think there was a bit where I always really emotionally supported my mother. And during kind of those college years, it was like a big separating like from her and just figuring it out as I go. So yeah, I did graduate. I would say at the time it was a bit of just survival. I had
Mhm.
to work and go to school, and going to Mills College where, most of my friends and the whole class, I would say, of course, had that family support that I didn't have. So I think that's where in those years it was a bit of the mentality of keeping up with the Jones where I worked, I took out student loans, and I just tried to make it seem like I had it together. It really wasn't until my late 20s that I felt like I had the time and space to really bring my head up and realize what I went through. But
Did you, I totally get the sort of parenting a parent
yeah. Yeah.
mindset. What comes with that often, though, is also never mind the stress of just living your life, but the stress and the challenge that goes along with caring for somebody else. Did you have times of just saying, screw this, I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to go wild and all that? Or did you kind of just maintain and push through that phase? Ask that
I
as
don't think my wild I'm definitely someone where, what is it? I have a high bottom.
yeah, yeah. I asked that not because I'm
Yeah.
trying to get any salacious story, but I know,
Yeah.
like, when I left home, it was just like there was so much death in my life leading up. Like, I accepted death
Yeah.
as an end at some point, and so it was like, live to the fullest. And of course, as a teenager, I don't know what the hell live to the fullest
Yeah.
means. Go as crazy as you can and put yourself in situations that probably should have killed me multiple times over, and I just lucked out and came out the other side. But I'm curious, you seem, and it could be a male-female dichotomy as well. My sister did not do the same thing that I did, and so I asked that
Yeah.
because I'm curious about how people kind of work through that and get to the other side.
Looking back, and it's funny, I absolutely had no awareness around it at the time, but I think that there was always this piece of trying to recreate the family
Mm,
that I lost,
yeah,
and so what that looked like, I had really close friendships in college. I only lived on campus for the first year, and then I moved off campus with, like, my best friend at the time, and it was a lot of having dinner parties and like, creating this home,
yeah,
and it's funny thinking about it now because, there was a lot of love and joy. I was, like, probably 18, 19 at the
that's
time,
awesome. Yeah.
and now being a mother and everything, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I think I had more joy, like, cooking and homemaking back then than I do now."
I understand that completely. It's funny meeting when talking that family. For me, that's what I got into bands. It was call it a gang or a family. There was that search for something, and for me, the band, that was like anything you could do to try to hold it together. Looking back, I always thought it was funny. My music partner died in 2020 unexpectedly from cancer, and
Mm,
I always thought I was the battery. I was the one that kept this together. And when he died, we had a friend do a documentary on the band, and what I found was that he was actually the battery. He was the one that kept it going. I was the one that wanted this to be something more than a band. I wanted it to be a family, and it was always difficult when people left or you had to get rid of someone. But to me, I carried all those things to where it's like I wanted a quote unquote normal family. And it took me
right.
a long time to realize that doesn't exist. But yeah, no, I
It
totally get it.
doesn't.
Yeah.
I think that's so much like now fast forward with the work that I do, and of course I bring all that I am to this work,
Yeah.
you know, what my therapist says, which I just so agree. It's like it's not a question if a family is like dysfunctional. It's not like this on and off switch that I think most of us think. It's really just a spectrum.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely what I see in my practice. It doesn't matter if you have no money or a ton of money, families are dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Of course, we can evolve, we can change, we can do better. And especially as a mother, I'm trying to do
Mm.
all that I can to be the best version of me and create a healthy environment for my daughter. And there's a lot of pieces that won't be passed down, but I know that there's also a lot of pieces that still will be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where doing the work, the therapy, the conversations, the
Well,
meditating, the
I mean, I could stick on this for so long, and I do wanna get to where you are today, but you mentioned one of the things I do ask is, so college, that's where you meet some people that really impact you. You mentioned the strong friendships you built there. I'm gonna hold off on that because 'cause I'll muddy the waters too much with this question, which I do
Uh-huh.
constantly, but were there any professors, so as you go through college, you've got these relationships. Were there professors you mentioned getting into sort of the fiduciary work young, which sounds like just a couple years after college.
No, it's funny, in college, this was definitely not on my radar, this work, but a few things. So, when I changed my major, I think 4 or 5 times,
Okay.
and where I, like, finally decided to, "Okay, this is why I'm choosing this major," it was, like, the major that allowed me to take the as many different classes. It was, like, the most, like, liberal arts degree, and it was called Political, Legal, Economic Analysis with an emphasis in international relations, and I also minored in women's studies. Mind you, where I started pre-med.
Yeah.
Then I was like, "Oh, then I'll go the nursing." They had a nursing track, and I would say there were 2 professors that kind of stood out for me, while at Mills, and Judith Bishop she taught a women's and religions class,
Okay.
and taking that class is totally where I was like, I finally threw in the towel with the kind of pre-med nursing track. on top of coupled with organic chemistry, which I just was like, this is just horrible. So yeah, that really, I don't know, I guess sparked just a whole passion and interest of me. And like this, I obviously wasn't sure how it would manifest into a career, but I was like, I want more classes like this. And then my other professor that I just spent a lot of time with, I took a lot of her classes, and that's a piece of the women's studies, was Libby Potter. And yeah, I don't know, it's hard for me to formalize like what it was about her, but I learned a lot from her and her classes, and also just asking questions. I remember there were like a few topics, which of course I don't remember what it was, but I remember going to her, like trying to come to a formalized answer, and she just kind of left me in being okay with kind of more of the gray.
Yeah.
And I think that for me was like probably if one of the threads that I do take through from higher education and my college journey is being okay with that, of realizing like the quick, easy answer and the black and white thinking that actually is not really what we want to go for.
Yeah.
It's really learning how to think and question and be curious. And I'm definitely like one of those people where I'm a lifelong learner. I have this growth mindset. That's definitely I think one of my really big strengths of what's with me, has stayed with me, of who I am. So
Cool. Cool. You've said a couple things that make me think of, are you fans at all of Alan Watts or Kurt Vonnegut?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm guessing this is musicians.
No, Kurt
Oh, no.
Vonnegut's a famous writer, Slaughterhouse-Five, a bunch of
Yeah.
books. He's got a
Oh, I did
fantastic,
classics, yeah.
presentation on stories. I'll send it to you after this. You'll
Yeah,
enjoy
please
it.
do.
Alan Watts came out of the '60s. He was, to put it bluntly, a bit of an asshole, but he did a lot of work in the same vein of like Ram Dass and sort of spiritual people. And so it's
Mm.
just, anyway, I'll send you links to all that stuff.
Yeah,
I think you'll
please
enjoy it.
do. That resonates. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so a bit with the story and me graduating, I didn't have this clear focus with my career. I chose this major because it allowed for me to take a lot of different classes. It was a bit, it's funny looking back, it was a bit of, it would be the track that you would go on if you wanted to go to law school. Though that wasn't my motivating factor for me doing that major. I was graduating in 2010. I never did like an internship during school because I was always having to work to support myself, and was really in kind of that scarcity, like I think hand to mouth. And once I graduated college, that was when I think reality really set in with how much student loans I had taken out. It really took me probably another 2 years to actually even understand and know the numbers and how interest was accruing. I think when it was all said and done, I had about $70,000 of
wow.
student loan debt, which just felt really crippling at the time. And also graduating in 2010, when I was one of the classes and generation where we were kind of sold this promise of, don't worry, take out student loans. It's
Yeah.
an investment in yourself, and then no one's hiring. So what I actually did, it's a bit of a story. Going back to what we touched on, I was always kind of trying to recreate this home and this family that really had been broken and shattered. And so much of what I loved doing in college was hosting these dinner parties and cooking. And again, we're in the Bay Area. It's Alice Waters, like this whole like culinary mecca. And so what did I decide to do? I decided to work in a kitchen cooking because
Wow.
I love cooking. So that was what I did for 4 years after graduating college. And I had a unpaid internship. I worked at a local restaurant. They're still there, Wood Tavern. If anyone's in Oakland area and Rockridge, it's a great restaurant. The owners are just wonderful. And it kind of what you were speaking to before about like when you were in the band and how there was kind of like this family unit, like
Yeah.
that restaurant and that whole scene was very much like the dysfunctional family in ways. And so in a way, it just was like looking back, it like made no sense, but it was like, of course, that's where I would land and need to be at that point in time. So yeah, I loved it for the first year, but honestly, I probably stayed in 3 years too long because I just didn't know what was next. Cooking is hard work. You're on your
That's talk
feet.
about burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, and it was absolutely exhausting. I remember just being in my early 20s and I was already having like issues with my hands and wrists that I still have today. And that's where and one of the main pieces where once I started going back to school and thought I would be a hospice nurse, that I realized, when I was cooking, I was like, I don't want to have a profession that requires my physical body because your body breaks down and that's not a career that has this longevity. So yeah, once I started going back to school for nursing and then started doing the work and was like at a skilled nursing facility and talking to relatively young nurses in their 40s, like everyone had back problems. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, kind of sending me the warning. And I was like, oh, so this is not it, but it feels close.
That gets us up to where we wanted to get to is like how you got
Yeah.
into fiduciary, but I do want you to go into that, how you found it, what attracted you, what kept you sort of moving forward. But you were smarter than me. I did not understand the concept of understanding self. We all think we understand
Mhm.
ourselves, right? It seems like
Yeah.
a very simple thing. Do you know yourself? Yeah, of course I know myself. I like peanut butter and candy and walking the dog, right? But that the true concept of understanding self, your motivators, your values, the things that are near and dear to you, takes actual conscious effort and work for most people. And
Yeah.
I was one of those people, but I didn't get there till my 40s. And it sounds like you
Mhm.
were turning that corner already in your 20s. And so as you go into this next phase of your life, and I know you with the work you do, you're going to have to do this with your clients as well.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
I'm curious how you tie that all together.
Yeah, really. So it was a death. So I'll just call her by first name, Leslie. And so I'll paint the picture. I was literally working the line. I was working at Wood Tavern and I got the call from my partner at the time. And it was like her aunt. So it was someone that we had spent like, basically every Thanksgiving with for the past few years, and it was someone that I wasn't personally close to, so I think that also might have been, like, a piece where I I wouldn't say that I didn't feel sadness, but it wasn't like losing someone within my own family system. There wasn't, like, a ton of grieving that was present for me, but I just knew that I needed to be there, and she had been battling brain cancer. She had multiple surgeries and basically the referral was made for hospice. And at that point, I guess the only death that I had been present for was when my dad's mother passed, and I was only 5 at the
Mm.
time. So it was like my first death of being witness to as a young adult. And I got the call, and it just was like, of course I'm gonna be there. So I literally left. We drove up. She was out in Sebastopol, and I think we stayed up there for about 2 nights, maybe 3 days, and it was just this weird for those that believe in past lives, like, I'm like, I must have been doing this work in past lives because it was just like this this leaning in and, like, I was alongside, like, the hospice nurse and just, like, supporting Leslie, like, with turning her in the bed and, like, toileting, and, again, this wasn't someone that I was super close to, but it just felt like this, like, knowing, and of course, I'll be there and supporting the family, and this family, I also wanna just say, was just, like, absolutely gorgeous. Even as a parent now, I would say it's been one of the few, like, healthy families and really this theme of unconditional love, And so Thanksgivings were always like potluck style. And it was just this feeling of the door is always open. And so in my 20s, I'm now married to a man, but I was in a same sex relationship for most of my 20s. And I was estranged from my dad at that time, and my mom had a lot of opinions and judgment about me being in a relationship with a woman. So there was just not a lot of closeness with my parents. And this family was just like, we don't care who you are, just you're always welcome. And it was just a place that you wanted to be. And I just felt so wrapped in love. So seeing kind of the mom now dying, she had 2 kids in high school, I think, at the time. It's a heartbreaking story. Yet there was just so much openness, so much love. And I just remember that this life that I had been living and feeling like I need to go back to work. I wasn't sure of that next step. I felt really cornered and trapped. I didn't have a lot of money, right? I still had a ton of student loans. But there was just this like being present with her death that I just really latched onto and was like, this is work that I want to do. So within 2 months, I quit my job. I left the cooking work. I enrolled in a nursing assistant training program because I knew it was kind of a fast track to just doing the work.
Yeah.
And that I didn't want to, if I was doing nursing, I wanted to be as certain as I could be if I was going to have to take out more student loans to go back to school. So I was like, let's just do like, it's low time, relatively low expense, and start doing the work and see if this is what I want to do. So I moved back in with my mom, which was really, I remember, humbling for me because I was about to turn 25. I never lived with her since I went to college. And when it was really kind of a coming to my knees moment for me, I describe it as a quarter life crisis.
Yeah.
And yeah, I left that relationship. I left the Bay Area, which was very hard because my mom was still in Sacramento, and started going to nursing school. And like I already shared, there were pieces about nursing that already were pretty consistent with what I knew I didn't like about cooking. And part of synchronicity of life, of those breadcrumbs of life, I had it was a family friend that we lived on the same street in Sacramento. I babysat her boys all through high school, and she had explored the fiduciary work, and she obviously knew the phase that I was going in, and the phase that I was in of like soul searching and trying to figure out what I wanted. And she was like, I think you would love this work. And I know a professional fiduciary out in Sacramento that needs an assistant. And so I went for an interview. I almost didn't go because I didn't have any awareness of what this was and why she saw the connections, but I did go, and it was about a 45-minute commute. So that was honestly why I almost didn't go to the interview. I was like, I don't want to have a commute, and I don't even know what this is. But once I got in the office and started being exposed to the work of a professional fiduciary, I was like, oh my gosh, this connects so many pieces. And yeah, of course, the end of life care piece is there. But also, I would say around this time, once I had that gap where I finished the nursing, I had done some clinical hours at a skilled nursing facility. I was applying to nursing jobs, but nothing was really fitting. That's also when I was finally kind of coming to terms with my student loan debt, reading a lot of personal finance books, setting up like a whole plan with the debt payoff and knowing when I would be officially debt free. And I found out I really liked numbers and the personal finance piece. I wasn't sure, is there a way that this will connect? But it did. And I did also consider going to law school. So it was like between the financial, the law, the end of life care piece. Oh my gosh, there's this profession called professional fiduciaries. What the heck is that? And yeah, once I went into the office, I got offered the job and I stayed there for 2 years. So that I think that kind of is the story of what brought me originally to
Yeah.
the work and kind of where all who I am and
Yeah. And we
all this.
touched on the sort of entrepreneurialism, that line from your father to you. And so obviously you were there for 2 years and decided to go out on your own. Was there any event where you just said, I have to go out on my own? Or was this just something where after 2 years you felt like, I just can't work for somebody else and I got to go do it?
That's a good question. So we already talked about how much I don't like Sacramento. And so it actually wasn't at 2 years. Then I worked for another fiduciary out in
Okay.
the Bay Area for another 6 years.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So, yeah, for another 6 years, I did this work. So that's where I gained just at the time, it felt a bit of like treading water professionally. But now knowing what I know, I'm like, oh my gosh, no, it was wonderful. Like I was doing the reps, really getting clear on there's a lot of different types of work under this profession. And I really have niched and specialized very narrowly in this profession of the work that I love to do. And also, this career and this work is very much based on trust and reputation. And so I was really building my professional network over those years. So once I did decide to go off on my own, it was just easy for people to know me, to trust me. And also for me to have a lot of experience, like managing a lot of really kind of complex cases that I think if I just went off on my own, I would have never had exposure to that kind of work. But because I was working for well-established fiduciaries, they had all sorts of different work and really kind of complex cases that I wouldn't be exposed to otherwise. So yeah, going off on my own, that's another kind of interesting perfect storm. Like it wasn't planned at the time. I was like, oh, I'll be licensed and stay working for the fiduciary I was at in the East Bay. But COVID happened.
Yeah.
And the weird kind of timing was that I took my licensing exam 2 days before the shelter in place order where everything shut down. I'm really glad that I did the licensing. I did because I think otherwise it probably would have kicked things out another year. And I sheltered in place with my now husband. We were just dating at the time, and he's an engineer and lives in Silicon Valley. And so, kind of through kind of COVID, it brought us really closer together. And we had dated for several years because of the distance. It was more we see each other on weekends. But going through something like COVID and all of that, I think for a lot of couples, it like broke them apart.
Yeah.
And then you also heard of some couples where it like really brought them together. And it really brought us together and kind of navigating just the whole landscape of really the unknown, of what to believe, what to do. Yeah, so after we decided to officially move in together, and so then it was kind of this I ended up being just teed up where it just made sense for me to go off on my own because, commuting back would be like an hour drive each way. I got licensed and then just so much change, like I think for everyone where it was just like and I guess the other piece too was that money coaching I talked to early in the conversation. I was doing that work during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so making that kind of connection. And I think a piece too is at that point, I also had become debt free. And so, I mean, that right is one of the main reasons why I'm very adverse to having any debt. There's this level of freedom and independence that's just, that for me, that's so much of who I am and what I'm after. It's not about accumulating a pile of stuff. It's really living on purpose and intentional and feeling the sense of freedom. So I think with all of it, it was like, oh, that makes sense where I'm ready to kind of spread my wings and do this.
Yeah. I'm curious, since you made that, as I said, leading into this, the concept of understanding self. And You were definitely ahead of schedule compared to me, so congrats on that.
Let's say it's a work in progress.
But if you could just quickly, so we've talked about fiduciary. We haven't actually said the work that you do, but how much of your work, particularly in your own business right now, how much of that is like numbers and process, and how much is part of that therapy position of getting people to think about who they are and how they want to move forward or what they want to leave behind?
It's hard to kind of put a number or percentage to it because it's really both.
Yeah.
I would say the the human side of this, like the relational side of this work, that's the hard work. Managing assets and numbers and finances and the administrative work, there's a lot of paperwork, which I'm very good at. I err on the side of being very controlling and type A and OCD. I've always been like super clean and organized. One of the great reasons why I would have been a wonderful nurse and why I was great working on the line. You've got to have a whole system and being clean. So all of that definitely is an important piece of the work. But the hard part is the relationships and the willingness to have difficult conversations. What's interesting, I haven't really ever shared this with most people, but you just seem one of those since this conversation's there, is that when I was doing the money coaching, that's when I realized, oh, why is it that I do this work? What brought me to this work, again, is so much related to who I was in that family unit of being the oldest, of being the parentified child. And really, from as long as I can remember, knowing love is tied to kind of caretaking and really kind of in a way being a guardian to my mother.
Yeah.
And how interesting that now, fast forward 35 years, and professional fiduciary, we can act in a lot of different capacities. So maybe it's helpful should I define it now for
Yeah,
you
yeah,
and for
yeah.
listeners? Yeah. So in California, we have this small profession called a professional fiduciary. There's actually a license. We're one of two states that has licensing, but under kind of this, what I call an umbrella term of fiduciary, we can act in different capacities. So we can act as a conservator or guardian. I can act as someone's agent, like whether that's under the durable power of attorney for finance or under the advanced healthcare directive and really be someone's healthcare decision maker. And then I can also be a trustee. Where I really specialize and focus in my practice is trust administration and also an area called special needs trusts, which is really, really important work. And it just becomes that much more niche when you kind of focus on that area. And that's where a lot of times my clients are of some sort of disability. And there's a way of legally having basically a money in a special needs trust. They can never control it. And there's a lot of rules and regulations around what the money can and cannot be used for. But basically, it allows for them to still be receiving public benefits like Medi-Cal. California's a Medi-Cal or Medicaid, SSI, SSDI, food stamps, affordable housing, all sorts of programs, because it never counts as their individual money. So that's one of the areas I focus in. But one of the reasons why I don't do conservatorship work. And a lot of the reason why I do that is because I realized what originally brought me to this work was so much of feeling like this duty, this responsibility, this overgiving, this caretaking. And it is a lot of what I love doing. That I think that's originally what brought me to the work. I've realized that, and especially as I have my own practice and build my business, that's like a one-way ticket to being absolutely depleted and exhausted, especially juggling this work with being a parent. So, yeah, that's a bit of the work I do, and I absolutely love it. I think now where I've begun to also spend more time and energy is reaching people proactively.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything you want to say or if I should just start talking about that piece.
Yeah, keep rolling.
Yeah. So with this work, I find that there a, someone starts working with a professional fiduciary. There's two camps of clients. One camp is the the people that have really never planned, or if they did plan, it was a poor plan.
Yep.
So what that can look like is someone's estate is going through probate. If no one can act, a professional fiduciary can do that work. So that's really like nothing was written down, and now basically the courts and probate law is going to dictate who gets what. It can also look like maybe there was a plan, whether that was a will or a trust, and now beneficiaries are maybe challenging it, maybe not agreeing, and now that estate is being litigated and winds up in court. A lot of times, what will happen in that scenario is the judge will appoint a neutral party, a professional, to kind of basically go in, assess, and basically get the job done. And then also there's situations where there's bad actors. Those are the really heartbreaking cases where like financial elder abuse, where money's been stolen and we have to remove this bad actor and put in a professional. So that's one way. And so typically that's all going through the courts. And really, where I specialize in my practice is working with clients privately. So that's not going through the courts. And so, how people would work with me is typically proactively, where I'm being named in their estate planning documents in what's called successor roles. So, just using you as the example, you might go to your attorney, your estate planning attorney, you're setting up your estate plan, and for whatever reason, the attorney is, oh, there's a professional fiduciary. You can name them in backup roles. A lot of times it's people, I have a lot of solo agers. So people either never married or maybe they're married, but they don't have children. They don't want to put that burden on friends, or maybe they don't have really an extensive support network. So that's where they really have no one to act. And then I also have a lot of families where they might have children and they might have someone to act, but I think being in the Bay Area, more people are transplants, so their children aren't local, or their kids have really demanding jobs and busy full lives, and so they don't want to place that burden on their children or their family that they could name. So that's where they wind up getting referred to someone like me.
Yeah.
And so over the years, time and time again, I'm sitting down with prospective clients and and again, these are really people that are ahead of most. I don't know if you know the numbers, Kurt, but only 1 in 3 people in the United States has an estate plan in place.
Yeah.
So
I saw
that's
30% in those numbers before.
yeah, it's really sad. And so, okay, so if you don't have a plan at all, that means everything is going to go through the courts, really. And so the people that I'm sitting down with are that 1/3 that are planning, right?
Yeah.
And even there, what I was finding is that it was about 50-50 chance, flip a coin, that people were asking me questions and really only thinking about after death. And I was just repeating myself of when I would ask questions like, what about if you're incapacitated? Who would you want to be making your decision? And even if you have a spouse, okay, what about the surviving spouse? And I was always left with, oh, we hadn't thought about it. Oh, you bring up great points. So after honestly having, at this point, it's been probably hundreds of conversations like this, I've been inspired to launch a podcast of my own that's called The Legacy of Love, and also come on podcasts like yours and really spread this message, because I think estate planning like really needs to be better understood. I always assume, oh, attorneys are having these conversations with clients. Maybe some are, but I don't think most are. And I think that also for the everyday person, a lot of people are really intimidated by attorneys. And I think that needs to change. So that's where I love being kind of the the professional, what I've seen is kind of the image that came to mind was like, I'm downstream to where everyone is ultimately going to wind up, right? The one guarantee in life, we're all going to die. And after working with hundreds of families and seeing what works well and what doesn't, I've realized, oh, like I can really come to the collective and share this like wisdom of what is working and what is happening. And more times than not, there's no plan. But even with setting up an estate plan, that oftentimes that's not enough. So how can we plan comprehensively? How can we set up our loved ones for success, our own lives for success? And I really believe that the more that we can change this kind of the mindset, the energy behind why we plan, that it really can have this ripple, not only for our life, future generations in our family, and also for all waking up to this, the power that we hold, it can really change the world.
Yeah.
So, and I'll be honest, like becoming a mother has just brought this message so much more home to me. And what I see it is, it's just filled up like and lit a fire for me of the work that I do and really understanding the importance. Part of it is feeling like I feel so vulnerable as a parent.
Hmm.
This is I think the first podcast that we've really kind of covered like a lot of my journey and my story and what brings me to this work. Part of that is I'm fiercely independent. I've kind of been off on my own since I was 18. I have this kind of do it yourself mentality and I'm the one that's always kind of outpouring and caregiving.
Yeah.
And becoming a mother, I realized, oh, I can't do this alone. I have to create a village. And with planning, with my estate plan, but even just with my life, right? I can't be sitting down having a conversation like this with you and reaching your listeners if my daughter's not set up with care. We're talking on the weekend, so she's with her dad. It's a little less planning, but
I think that you touched on a lot, but my experience, and what I'm taking a guess here, but I'm guessing we're lucky in this country if half of the people in the area where you're focused have the skills, the human skills plus the technical skills to pull that together. Because in my mind, I think what we do when we create these heavy-handed processes, which I understand from a legal standpoint are necessary for protection purposes, but there's too many people in my view that A, are much smarter than me, but B, are asking the wrong questions. So at the end of the day, I don't think the real questions are, where do you want your money to go? Who should get what? What do you want to happen to you after you die? Those are things that have to be answered. But the real question becomes really, what do you want the people that you're leaving behind to have to handle? And that's something that I never hear anybody ask, because if you lead with that, I think it really gets the focus off of the individual to ensure that the people that are left behind, who are already having a difficult challenge losing you, have things as set up as possible to make life as easy as possible for them. And I think too often we don't start from that point. And I think it would be better if I don't know, maybe you don't start there, but maybe it's question 2 instead of question 1.
no, I do think we start there. I
Yeah.
love what you say. This is my whole point. I think, okay, what I see is that the people that, are planning, which is great, most are approaching this from a place of, let me check it off the box
Yeah.
of things to do. They're moving from this place of like worry and anxiety and also not really knowing. And how often do we just honestly outsource our power to professionals? We see that with right money and just, oh, I'll hire a financial advisor and not really be well informed. And we do know those like horrible cases, right? Where money is stolen or mismanaged and really does like such a disservice. But I think that a lot of people just are moving from that place. And that is, I think, one of my biggest points and message that no, if we're moving from this place of ultimately love, of knowing that if I'm spending this time and making this financial investment, setting up plans for myself, of planning for incapacity, planning for a good death, also planning for whether you have children or you don't, who's getting that money, how that's going to be administered. We should have basic understandings of what an estate plan is. And then we're partnering with an attorney that specializes in this area and is in your local state because probate laws are state specific. We want to also partner with this attorney that we feel like we can ask the stupid questions and they should be a thought partner. We're not just completely, oh, tell me what to do. And this is just kind of like a template estate plan. No, our lives are so unique. Let me tell you, I've seen so many like unique, that's why I also love this work. I'm always learning something because every client's different. And whether it's who they are, obviously, as a person, but also what people invest in. And I've seen some weird stuff over the years. But yeah, that energy that we bring, that will for sure have a ripple. And of course, it's going to be a more holistic plan. We're going to be planning much better with that kind of intentionality, that kind of energy of knowing, oh, wow, I'm really doing this with loving myself and my family and that next generation. But that has a ripple. Absolutely. And
Yep.
I think that estate planning, why do we not plan? Why do most not plan? Okay, let's think about it. The estate plan requires us to look at our own mortality, right? And we live in a death denying culture for sure. And it requires us to look at our money, our assets, where also so much shame, right? So many people don't want to talk about that or look at that still, even in 2025. And then it also requires us to look at our family and our support and our relationships around us and maybe the lack thereof.
Yeah.
And going back to what we talked about before, it's every family is dysfunctional. It's just a matter of the spectrum that we're all on. And so, yes, I have absolute compassion and understanding of why people don't plan and why those with a plan, most people aren't kind of coming to this with kind of wide open eyes and intentionality. Let's just get it done, check it off the box, sign the documents, and I'm going to shove it in a drawer and never think about it again. But part of comprehensive planning is understanding these are living documents. And we need to be kind of, I think, tending to this part of our lives on an ongoing basis. We're going to be updating our documents. That should be part of the plan. And every attorney has kind of a different rule of thumb, but I've heard anywhere from 3 to 5 to even as long as 10 years. But laws, tax codes, all of those change, but also our life changes. So even just me, for example, like we have a 2-year-old. And so our estate plan is absolutely going to be changing and evolving as our daughter grows up and as our community, right? And our support changes and as our parents age, that's all going to be changing. So that's where, and one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about having these conversations of reaching people upstream is this is all where we're kind of we're all headed in this direction. And also knowing we're not going to get it perfect, but let's do the best job that we can. So successful families are willing to really lean into these harsh realities of looking at the problems, facing our own mortality, and regularly we're having these dinner time conversations. This isn't a one and done job. Oh, I had the death conversation. We're done. We'll close that door and not talk about it ever again. We're continuing to look at that and it's going to be evolving. So that's where I think this work really can have the power to transform ourselves and our families and the next generation because, wow, talk about turning the light on for your life if you wake up to that. And that's so much of what I love about death. It's the same coin. Like the more that we lean into whether it's being witness to someone's dying or just the reality of our own death, that brings into focus like what life is. Let's be a live wire. And that's so much of, what lights me up is, oh yeah, like doing this work, this is why I care.
Yeah. I usually have two parts at the end of the podcast, but I'm not going to cover the last part with you because I already know the answer. Usually at the end, I ask people about the legal aspects and how set up they are and things like that. And I'm pretty sure I know the answer from you on that front. So I'm not going to
Yes.
touch on that. What is interesting though is all the stuff we're talking about. We mentioned the 1 in 3 or 30%, but that holds. I would say that you're probably the 35th or 36th interview I've done, and maybe 8 or 9 people have something set up out of those people. So
Yeah.
that kind of percentage holds on there. But
Do you mind me responding
sure,
to
yeah,
everything you
yeah,
said? So, yes, I do have a plan and it will continue to evolve, but a story I'd like to just share
sure,
because I think that this is where even for me in the last 6 months has just hit home that much more is like assuming that as professionals, we have our shit together. And let me tell you, like, that is not true.
oh yeah,
I actually have a lot of clients that are attorneys themselves, and
yeah,
they were the ones that were only thinking about after death. I was like, come on, you're an attorney. You should know better. No, they're not planning for incapacity. And this just at the tail end of 2024, I took over a few cases from a professional fiduciary on her deathbed. And boy, Kurt, can I just tell you that it has just hit home that this matters,
yeah,
that so much of this work it's beyond just getting your legal documents. This has to do with our identity of who we're choosing to be. And what I saw was someone at that really had her career had expired a long time ago, and it wasn't a sudden diagnosis. She had been sick for years, and I also made assumptions of, oh, is she holding on to this work because of money? But I found out after taking over, she hadn't been paid on those cases for almost a decade. So what is that about? It's about this identity of believing, oh, only I can do this job.
yeah,
And to the point that I had 2 30-minute conversations with her and then she died.
mm,
It set me up for taking over like a bit of a mess. Things really hadn't been tended well for several years. And now my clients, they're looking for answers of knowing what happened. And it's a lot more work of piecemealing things together. And also what's heartbreaking is that she didn't get a retirement. She also on her deathbed had to literally be transferring me information and cases. And now her family is literally mailing me her files for these
wow,
cases. And that's where I've just seen where I'm like, the denial of death, we really need to all acknowledge it, that our brains trick us of thinking that there's always going to be a tomorrow.
yeah,
And whether you're a professional, whether you're a parent, just anyone listening to this podcast, like just know that, just accept that reality. There's no shame in that. And get your estate plan done. And also partner with professionals that you like to work with, that you don't feel intimidated by. These, I think, are really big pieces of planning well. And also know it's not going to be perfect and it's going to be ever evolving as we are.
yeah. And I will just say I did not make the assumption based on you being a professional.
But just the
I did
conversation.
I did make it based on the conversation.
Good.
If there's one thing I picked up in sort of the chaos that I was raised in, I'm pretty good at reading people.
Yeah,
And so I
yeah.
kind of just assumed it. I have interviewed people in the legal profession that are in their 50s and 60s. And when I've said, "So I'm assuming you're a lawyer, you've got this all set up," and they've said, "I'm working on it." So
Yeah.
I
Yep.
have seen that. But yeah,
Even with my professional network, I was setting up we have what's called a practice administrator, but it's a recent law that's passed specific to our fiduciary license, and it's part of the kind of succession planning and making sure clients are served in the event of our incapacity or death. And I was reaching out to my network, and it amazed me that it was just like crickets. Who set this up and what attorney supported you with that? And I was like, yeah, of course. I'm the fiduciary in our 30s worrying about it. And trust me, I'm on the very young side of the profession as a whole. I think the average age is over 60 of professional fiduciaries the last time I checked. So yeah, anyways, as my therapist has said that this is one of the gifts of my trauma. My brain is a little bit future focused
yeah.
and I think 20, 30 years in advance. And of course, doing this work, I'm only just strength training that part of my brain. So,
No, that's yeah, well, that's good. I will end though on so maybe touching on the work that I'm doing, which is not as legally anchored as the work that you do, but I kind of think about the other side of legacy. So away from the financial side, as you and I know, legacy is something bigger than just the finance side, especially for most people in this country and around the world. Legacy is almost always something other than financial. And when you think about I'm not even going to say before you die because that's if all things go according to statistics, you've still got quite some time left. The next 10, 20 years, other than your professional work, you mentioned you're relatively recently married,
oh,
but for you, you've got a 2-year-old recently married, you've got your work. You're obviously, from your time in kitchens and things like that, you've got a creative element to your life as well. How do
yeah.
you balance these things? How do you prioritize? What do you focus on as you go forward? Are there any concrete objectives? And finally, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but do you
Okay.
do anything to capture journaling, video journals? I know you've got your work and your podcast and things, but the sort of mementos to leave behind to people who might come up after you.
First off, for all the parents listening, I think, especially mothers, there is no balancing.
Yeah.
There really isn't. It, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so rewarding.
Uh,
I'm definitely in that like messy middle of life where it's like everything pulls at me. And it's been interesting just the 2.5 years of being a mother and also just kind of where we started. Like I shared where I was always, when I was younger, like really trying to recreate this family unit that I lost. And I liked the kind of this domestic life and cooking and being at home. I am a bit of a homebody. And
yeah.
as much as I love connections and conversations, I do consider myself an introvert. So I'm a bit of a homebody during my downtime. But yeah, I've found myself as a mother where I thought I would be leaning more into the care and the day to day and maybe wanting to work less. But part of my journey that's been unexpected was that I actually really love the work that I do
Yeah.
and wanting to not only do my fiduciary work and run my practice, but also podcast and creating content. I think that has been like a big piece of bringing back that creativity that honestly the administrative work of professional fiduciaries is not creative at all.
There's the relational aspect of it, right? And that's
Yes. Yeah, the relational piece, oh my gosh, yeah. That
yeah.
was the honestly the foundation of this work is building those right relationships. And I at least my practice and my business is I always say I want to work with clients that want to work with me. There's a lot of this work that can be where your people don't want to work with you and you're kind of forced. That's a lot
Yeah.
of those court cases. Most people don't want to be conserved. They're going to be fighting you through it. And that's also where I'm like, yeah, I don't want to put my energy there. I want to really work with the people that want to work with
It's
me.
I
And
think you mentioned the search
yeah.
for family, it's almost like extended family at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I
Yeah.
know I sit in my clients' lives very uniquely. So Yeah, so for balance, it's not.
Yeah.
And yeah, actually, I love the work that you're doing, Lily's List, for this very reason. This actually is something that, as a mother, yes, I've done the estate plan. And I always say that's the starting place, like having the conversations, bringing people on board, but also creating the memories and documenting them. That is where I need to spend the most. And so actually I will share that so one of my kind of ideas, projects, is I want to start writing a letter to my daughter like every birthday.
Yeah.
It's not it definitely doesn't replace, the estate plan at all, the trust documents, but I think that really just getting clear with her of her, also her future. If God forbid something were to happen to me, I mean, that I want those letters to be there.
Yeah.
Have I done it yet? No. There is a bit where I do love podcasting because I feel like so much of podcasting has my journey with that has been giving myself permission to show up fully, like in my wholeness
Yeah.
of just as a human, not only as a professional fiduciary, as a mother, as the healed parts of myself, the broken parts of myself. Like, I don't have to be this perfect person and have it all figured out. And so there's so much that I do talk about her and my family, and I do that content will be there for her if she ever wants to listen to, but I know that's not enough. So I've always been kind of resistant to writing. Writing is like not my thing. I love talking. So actually, this has been an idea of mine of like maybe instead of a letter, I'll have, I don't know, a
A
private
message.
podcast for her.
Yeah. I love hearing you say that because I will keep that in mind because it could be something as simple as a date pops up and says, go take 20 minutes and record this, and you record it and it captures it every year and then just keeps it as part of your legacy page.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the cool time of this point in time with
Yeah.
technology and AI is the tools are there or they're
We all
becoming
have
to be
good, yeah,
there,
we have great
right?
video cameras and audio recorders in our pocket right now. So,
Yes. Yeah. So memorializing this, I think it is easier than ever. But I think also with my brain, it's more overwhelming because there's more options. You're like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, what do I need to do? But
yeah.
thank you for that reminder because again, this is where it is just there's no one has it all dialed in and perfect.
Like you said before, it
Love
doesn't
that.
have to be perfect and it won't be perfect. And so when you get 15 minutes, you can pull out your phone and open the recorder app and talk into it and save it somewhere. And if that's how you have to do it, then that's something that's valuable that you can leave. So,
I love that. I love what you're doing. And thank you for that nudge.
yeah, I'm going to stop there because I could keep talking to you all day and I've got to go feed the dogs here. Really appreciate your time, the work you're doing, meeting you. It was really a lovely conversation with you. And I will send you a bunch of links of things that I find interesting that I think you might as well. And
Please
please,
do.
yeah, and share anything you want with me and let me know how I can support you as you go forward.
Yeah, yeah, and just as we wrap up, of course, we'll link everything if people wanna get in touch with me or also follow the
Yeah.
podcast. We have a lot of, it sounds like, overlap in what we talk about and also a lot of, I think, differences too. I love your style of podcasting of really getting to the heart of the matter and having people tell their stories. Legacy of Love is a little bit more like practical and have a lot of professionals, a lot of estate planning attorneys, money coaches, all different conversations we have. But yeah, it might be fun for listeners to also check out if they're, especially for those like that are the beginning part of their estate planning journey, because there's a lot of good information there to help people. But lastly, I also have a free workbook for
Oh, cool.
listeners. So you can link that also in the show notes. And it's the Legacy of Love workbook. And again, wherever you're at in your estate planning journey, It's really kind of my offering to help people get to that kind of what we were talking about before, moving from that place of just being intentional and loving for ourselves and whether it's our children or just whatever we're leaving behind, and getting clear on that. Because I think going through those exercises, it's a lot of like self-reflection questions. The more that we're getting clear with what's important to us, our values, our wishes, and moving from that place, like that's where that energy has that ripple to just change the world. So,
Yeah. No, that's great. And yeah, I'll definitely link that stuff.
Kurt, this has been so much fun. Thanks for capturing some of my story.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll talk to you later.
You can't hang on to yourself. You don't have to try not to hang on to yourself. It can't be done. And that is salvation. The most important thing for anyone to realize is that you and every person you see will soon be dead.